What's the craziest thing you've seen someone do on a work? The craziest thing I ever saw that was actually safe for work. One of my coworkers always inserted disco mode into his Excel spreadsheets, where if you click on a certain cell or something, all of the other cells would flash colors and make patterns. And next story. When a company I worked for first got onto the net in the 90s, everyone was pretty green on how it worked and how slow it was. Apparently, one day the marketing manager tried to print a bunch of hardcore, inappropriate images from a site and sent them to our shared printer. After waiting and rechecking for some time, he thought the images wouldn't print. However, they finally come over the printer just in time for the director to pick them up when he went to retrieve his own business document. Next story. Mining crypto on old work computers years back was a classic IT department hobby. No one has any absolutely idea what's going on in there, and no one will notice that spike in power and HVAC usage. Hey boss, we need a bigger server. Give us money, and it gets rubber stamped. Next story. I was the messaging administrator and was asked by legal and HR to pull a confidential export of a traveling salesman's mailbox. I got some errors during the export process, and I wanted to verify that the export file was good, so I made a copy of the file to preserve the original copy as unmodified and opened the copy in my email client. The very first thing I saw was the email chain at the top of the mailbox, coordinating the inappropriate arrangement that was going to meet him at the hotel. I didn't even look for it. It was right there at the top. Dude, get a Gmail account. They're free. I just closed and deleted the copy and delivered the untouched original as requested. I've also had users complain about running out of mailbox space and then find a folder with a gigabyte of inappropriate images in their mailbox. I would just send a screenshot of their mailbox folder structure with that folder highlighted and close the ticket. I'm sure some people were shitting themselves when that happened, but I'm not going to say anything unless it's illegal. Once HR asks, though it's out of my hands, I provide whatever is requested. Public service announcement. Once you hit the send button, it is game over on trying to delete a message in a way that a competent admin can't recover it. You can delete it and empty the deleted items folder, but it is still recoverable by the admin, even if it's only been 10 seconds. Next story. Many years ago, I worked for a company that sold network servers, back when they were just tower PCs. A customer had some kind of problem with theirs, so they shipped it back to us. They were careful to protect it during shipping. Did they wrap the server in plastic before putting in the box? No. Did they fill the BA with styrofoam peanuts? No. They stuck the server in a box and filled the box with expanding urethane foam. The poor guys on the receiving floor spent the better part of a day chipping that damn thing out of the box, only to find out that it hadn't been wrapped, and expanding foam had gotten into the case. I'm not sure they were able to salvage anything from it. Next story. My former boss was caught multiple times watching adult film at work, and after the 5th or 6th incident, they fired him. I helped clean out his office, and there were printouts of adult content pics stuffed everywhere in his file cabinet, and the fabric surfaces of his workspace were in a suspiciously disgusting condition. The crazy thing is, that office had windows that anybody in the office could see through, and no blinds. I guess he just waited until everybody else had gone home for the day. Next story. One of our users got fired. I was looking at some traffic statistics, which I hadn't done for ages due to being severely understaffed. I found this one workstation which was known but should be on a shelf in a storage room somewhere active and consuming more internet bandwidth than anything else, TBS per month. In 2005, I remoted into the file system and browsed it and found a large amount of illegal stuff. Looked where it should be, judging from the switch port it was on, and sent the local IT manager and IT teacher leader an email genuinely asking him if he knew where this workstation was and who used it. CCing the IT director, my direct boss, not his. The IT director immediately rang me and said, investigate, look into the history of this computer and who used it, and take appropriate measures on their account and personal data. The conclusion was it was being used for a certain type of illegal file sharing. We lost connection with the computer, but we had the central event log and could easily see who logged onto this machine. It was the local IT manager. When we confronted him with it, he denied knowledge. The computer disappeared and reappeared a few days later in the office of another person in that school. He was trying to frame someone else. If he would have just admitted, we would have told him not to do it again, as there wasn't really any proper policy in place back then, which would have banned it. He was let go because he tried to have someone else take the fall for it, and I don't think he got much of a severance package. Good riddance. Next story. Fired a guy for well-documented performance-related issues. While combing through his computer to prep it for the next person, I found not only extensive inappropriate content and explicit chats with clients. A month or so later, he filed a claim for wrongful termination, which was totally bogus. But I think he wanted a quick settlement. I showed up to the hearing with 2 boxes full of blank reams of paper, with a sign on the box that said Bob's browser and chat history. His eye got huge upon seeing that and dropped the claim. 15 years later, I can't get those inappropriate cell photos out of my head. Thanks, Bob. Next story. I was doing remote support for a sales team in the 1990s. One of the salesmen called and told me that his computer that he used for presentations was catching on fire. This was prior to laptops being widespread. It was a large box with a CRT monitor built into one side and a detachable keyboard. We called them lunchbox computers. The crazy part is that after he unplugged it and the fire went out, he plugged it back in to see if it would still catch on fire. It would and did. Next story. We had a manager who got a brand new top-of-the-line laptop given to him every 6 months. The reason being is he destroyed them. I don't know if he was just clumsy or had a bad temper, but it'd be pristine when we handed it to him. Then a few weeks later, he'd show up and the thing would be falling apart. Keys missing, cracked cases, busted screens, you name it. He was a one-man laptop wrecking ball. On average, they lasted 6 months before becoming so busted up they just failed. I did end up fixing a couple of them up as best I could and giving them to other employees. But most went to recycling or the parts bin. Since he was director level, the company just bought him a new one every time. Next story. I had to fire an employee for very good cause. The guy was a sleazebag. After he left, the HR director came in and said, "Let's look at his browser history." His most visited site was an extremely inappropriate adult website. I thought it might have been a cat fancier website, but no, it was not. Next story. Sitting in a meeting, and one of the junior guys was driving the computer with an action list in Excel. At one point, the GM wanted to pull up a document that he had saved on his personal drive on the server. The junior guy logs off and puts in the boss's first name, last name into the login screen, and the boss reaches out to take the keyboard to put in his password. Rather than handing it over, the junior guy quickly types password 123, its default, and hits enter. Sure enough, it worked. Boss hadn't changed his password in about 2 years. There was a bit of a scowl and "don't do that again," but the boss couldn't be too mad, given he himself had obviously broken a major rule in its security. Next story. Not seen in person, but confirmed by various colleagues of the same branch. A guy at a company I worked for decided that it was the right thing to do to copy a software he found on a work PC for himself as it was a useful program. The PC was given to him from the customer they were working for, per their policy. Data transfer was obviously monitored. The customer was a well-known bank and had very strict policies for data transfer. The guy signed those policies when he started working for the customer. The freaking CEO and a board member had to personally apologize with the customer for the breach of trust to save the contract. The guy was fired on the spot. The program was an open source. Next story. Selling illegally imported turtles as a side business from a government computer. One day, the police showed up, seized his computer, and escorted him out of the building. We thought it was kiddie adult content, but it turns out he was smuggling exotic turtles to sell as pets and using his work computer. Just having a side gig on your work computer is enough to get you fired, let alone an illegal business. Next story. My former boss had a server packed with pirated movies, games, adult content, and whatever. He shared the address with everyone, and everybody knew about it. People just enjoyed a safe and easy place to get their wares. I was there for 2 years, and the server was there the whole time, being updated daily. Next story. It's not as extreme as some of the things here, but in 2011 I worked for a place they banned Spotify because it slowed down the network. Some people figured out that Netflix was not restricted. People would listen to movies all day instead of listening to Spotify. Never had a problem with the network's speed. Next story. Back in the days when film was the normal way of taking pictures, a guy brought a bunch of snapshots into the office to scan. Snapshots of his inappropriate escapades with 2 bigger ladies. All 3 of them had foot fetishes, so there was the foot version of an extremely explicit act. There was a tiny certain body part. There was a lot. He scanned them on a workgroup scanner, transferred them to his desktop via a file server, and then from there to floppies or CD. But then he left the scans on the file server, where I found them, and had to report them to HR. Next story. An old supervisor of mine screenshotted a woman doing squats in the gym, then proceeded to send via email. Unfortunately, he sent it to the manager of the gym who was actually on holiday, and thus this email was forwarded over to the regional manager. He wasn't with us very long after that. Next story. Not me, but my mom. And technically, not even my mom, but her work partners who didn't actually see it, but found out after it happened. Tax consultant gets fired for gross misconduct after suggesting a way a client can cheat the British tax code. Someone in charge forgets to order security to inappropriate arrangement. This guy out of the building and confiscate his equipment. So what does the recently fired guy do while his colleagues are in a meeting? Delete over 1,000 emails containing client financial and tax information and other details, and then delete everything that's already deleted in the recycling bin, then wipes the recovery files. Naturally, absolutely chaos occurs as the company is trying to enact damage control whilst trying not to lose important clients while they try to recover everything. Next story. I was working in the long-distance telephone reseller in the 90s. There was a PC in one of the offices that a coworker decided to format and use in his office. It turns out the PC had $250,000 worth of billing erased by the format. Next story. Entire department moved to a new part of the building, and so computers got shifted around to new users. Found out I was on my boss's station when I found his taxes and the job offer with our current employer that included pay and company stock. Next story. Old job a coworker, during staff meeting, demonstrated that an adult content site was not blocked, only to freeze the computer up on an adult content site website on a nice close-up. Another time, we were an agency for disabled adults. One of the guys we worked with was let alone at a computer. We came back to discover him on an inappropriate adult content page, and he was giggling like nothing as he watched. Next story. Sort of telling on myself here. But me and another guy discovered BBS boards back in the 90s and would go on and chat with people for hours at a time. Then one day, the head of it came up and ripped the network cable out of our department. Apparently, it cost 25 cents a minute for us to be on there each. We did this for like 6 months, 5 days a week. They'd just gotten the bill. Next story. While working for the government doing submarine maintenance, a woman at the tool crib downloaded a bunch of adult content pics onto the computer. She had a meeting with security where they printed out every picture with the date and time and asked her one by one if she downloaded them. She was furious that she wasn't allowed to keep the pictures. Her nickname was Leather Tits. Next story. Somehow, my cat is able to find and press all of the random short keys on my laptop. I don't even know what they are, as they flash on the screen. She has downloaded an extension for Chrome that I had never heard of before. She's a good kitty, but she can quickly mess up a laptop. Next story. That was me. I worked late night at a hotel doing accounting. I was taking a break while the printers were working and went to Facebook. On some page I saw a user talk about a revolutionary steam cleaning process recently developed from Cleveland, Ohio. So without thinking, I legit 100% went to Google and typed in Cleveland steamer and searched. Immediately, I knew what I had done, but it was too late. I clocked out at 7, and by 9, I was being called back to work to HR to talk about some things that had happened last night. Next story. Used to be a pharmacy tech. One of our 2 pharmacists, who's making over $150,000 and works literally 7 out of 14 days, got fired for watching adult content on one of the pharmacy computers. Bro, why? You have a smartphone, and you're not doing inappropriate things anyway, so why? Next story. I witnessed my boss open up a adult content email. To be fair, someone sent it to him, but he proceeded to open the email and swivel his monitor to me to show me. It was an inappropriate image of a woman cleaning windows with soap and such. Super cringe. Next story. I used to work as a defense contractor for the DoD. We were issued computers that required an access card to log into as 2-factor ID. There were strict rules to only use them for work-related tasks as they didn't want it to compromise security. You could be fired if you were found to be misusing government property. Anyway, one of my coworkers who worked directly for the DoD gets an email about some concerns that his laptop had been compromised or something and that he needed to turn it into it immediately for quarantine and inspection. He must have had some stuff on there that he shouldn't have, because before he turned that laptop in, he threw his laptop down the stairs on a work trip to make sure that hard drive got destroyed and couldn't be inspected. His plan worked, and there was no discipline or anything. I never found out what was on there. Probably just adult film. Next story. A guy, here, had a guy booking inappropriate services online once. I've also seen a lot of wild adult content I didn't know existed. During COVID, there was a huge spike in that. Next story. I work in IT. I didn't see them do it, but someone ate what I can only imagine was a cinnamon roll on the top of a closed laptop. We received it and it had deep fork marks all over it and what was probably icing. Used it as a plate, I guess. Was the strangest thing. Next story. I had a colleague tell a client that they don't need to shut down a software before modifying installation files, and it failed so spectacularly that it blue-screened the client's computer. So I guess the craziest thing I've seen is an IT professional believing another IT professional when they said it's okay to do the one thing it's never okay to do. Next story. Not at work, but at school, PCS. Someone installing a keylogger program to get the admin password so he could sell the password to our partners, so they could install CS 1.6 or other games. Next story. Some guy had installed World of Warcraft on his PC. What made it crazy is that at that company, employees didn't have admin rights on their desk PCs. Somehow, someone gave him those rights and he had it installed. What makes that crazier for those who don't know what that game is? But it's a massive time investment slash waster. Putting on a work PC is basically admitting he didn't do any real work on a regular basis. I did not report him, because to be blunt, it already was a thankless job. I didn't need any possible blowback from ratting someone out while knowing that my management would sooner fire me than back me up anytime some drama unfolds. Next story. A woman I met online worked for a major social media organization, which I learned because she sent me a video of her sitting on top of her desk, pleasuring herself with the company logo right behind her. Hope nobody had to use that keyboard after her. That counts as on a work computer, right? Next story. I worked in a team of 3 doing audits for a retail chain way back when. My coworker went on mat leave, and her replacement was a woman who was sweet at first. But we quickly learned she had the most awful personality. She did an audit on a store and wrote the most vulgar, racist, and sexually dehumanizing email about the store manager, who was actually a really nice guy. I was on the last day of vacation when she wrote it and was going to send it to me for reasons I can't fathom, but for some reason sent it directly to him. Then she forwarded it to me with the title, "Oops." I got a call from her the minute I was back to work, and she said she was probably getting fired. Then I read the email. 1 hour later, I got a call from HR asking what the heck, and she was right. She was fired that day. I ran into her a few years later at an industry networking event, and she was laughing about it and telling everyone around her about it when she saw me, including a horrified coworker of hers. The next week, she was fired from that job as well. Next story. Approximately 1990 leisure suit. Larry, approximately 2005, had a corporate security specialist assigned to my project who was unnaturally happy to be on what was, arguably, the worsted project in the whole enterprise. Turns out her previous assignment was investigating the Chicken Man, who allegedly, she had to prove it, did a search for extremely disturbing content involving animals multiple times per shift from his work computer, as in people and chickens. Next story. This was a few years ago within my organization. The entire department was called into a training room, and a long list of inappropriate websites were projected on the screen. Half the employees were laughing at the list. The other half was acting disgusted or panicking. The HR manager comes out and says, "This is a list of websites accessed on agency computers. This is your first and final warning." Next story. Not really someone doing something on their computer, but related. I work part-time as a cleaning lady. Once I entered an empty office to clean the floor. Everything seemed normal from the door because the computer screen was facing the back wall. When I went behind the desk to clean, I didn't look at the screen at first, but my eye was caught by a movement. This person's screensaver was a slideshow of adult content pictures. I saw maybe 4 or 5 as I stood there, surprised. Most were of a woman alone, either pleasuring herself or tied to a bed. I went out of the office before anyone came in and never went back to this workplace again. I was there as a substitute, so never even saw the person who had this screensaver, thankfully. But anyway, what the heck? Next story. Thankfully, I didn't see this because I was just a kid, but my parents run their own computer software business from home. In the 90s, long before Zoom was a thing, they'd often have to travel to demonstrate their software to potential customers on site. If they had to travel anyway, they'd try to fit in multiple demonstrations and would sometimes be gone for days at a time. They always found it a bit odd that anytime they called the office to check in with Ben, their programmer slash acting receptionist, the phone was always busy. But ah well, must be bad timing, right? Repeatedly, every time they called while away on business, stranger things have happened. One fateful day they left for a demonstration but hadn't got very far when they realized they'd forgotten something. They turned around to come home, and when they got to the office, yep, you guessed it. Turns out every single time they went away, Ben was immediately watching inappropriate content, all day, every day. And this was in the days of, get off the internet, I need the phone. No calls coming in equals no customer support, no sales, no business, basically. I know most of these comments are adult content, but it's the audacity for me. You did this every time they traveled? They hadn't even been gone 5 minutes and you're already doing inappropriate things? Next story. Oh boy, story time. I worked at this manufacturing company for a while, doing quotes. One of the VPs was married to the owner's daughter, so he basically had complete immunity. He would pretty regularly watch adult content, but the weirdest part was when the owner's granddaughter would come into the office to say hi, and he would still do it. Got caught by employees at least 3 times. He would have someone check his computer to see emails for him if he was traveling, and his inbox was about 70% adult film site promos. Next story. When I first started at my current job 14 years ago, I was working on the help desk on 3rd shift and got maybe 2 calls all shift. So me and the network operations techs would play World Golf Tour online. Next story. Worked in a call center back in 2003. Because I did all the online support, I often had to help reps who may need to know a person's online email or chat history. The number of reps on phone calls with customers while watching adult content was insane. I'd walk around from desk to desk a lot and constantly see people trying to hide their adult content browser windows. Next story. I was working on a Navy-owned ship, but it was crewed by us civilian contractors. We had company computers on board, no internet, and Navy computers with internet. We were pulling into Japan soon, and my watch partner was excited to figure out what kind of local entertainment scene he could meet there. Anyways, I was walking through the crew lounge after a watch one day, and he was at the computer. He called me over to proudly show off the Inappropriate Services site website he had found with pictures of the women you could hire. I just looked at him and said, "Really, dude? On the government computer?" His face dropped immediately, and he closed out the browser and logged off as fast as he could. Funny as hell. Nothing ever came of it, as far as I know. Next story. I worked with a guy who didn't do any of the work he was being paid for. He ran his side business, landscaping, from a work computer. All day, every day, clock in to clock out, and put the hours on the timesheet. We were all contractors. Next story. The web team was running an adult content server. One of the C-level execs, on an announced trajectory to be the next CEO, had an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. Our team had to go to his house to get his computers for the investigation because we had the closest employee in security. Another guy was streaming movies/anime during his whole shift. He did a good job of hiding it, but came up on the top 10 internet usage report. I finally tracked the computer down. Unfortunately, I had to rely on the manager for assistance. Asked him not to touch anything, and he destroyed any evidence and said, "Nothing to worry about here." Next story. Not crazy, just dumb. My old boss replied to an interview request with a rival company from his work email and copied the entire management team. Good thing he had another job interview lined up because he was fired on the spot. Next story. One of the engineers was moving from one location to another about an hour away. Packed up his desk in his pickup truck. The chair didn't fit right, so he left the tailgate open, then strapped tie-downs across the top of all this stuff. Later that day, my IT buddy was on the highway trying to find his HDD as the PC he packed has slid out and exploded on the highway at 80 miles per hour. There were some classified documents for a government project on it before he left, so they had to get the HDD back. Narrator. They did not get the HDD back. He didn't last long at the new location. Next story. In something like 2004, give or take, was consulting for a local company and found an animated adult entertainer app running in the system tray of their Windows server. Next story. This was back a number of years ago, when sound cards were not standard in PCs yet, but my boss asked me to install a sound card in his PC so he could listen to the adult content he was watching on the new high-speed internet line we just installed for the office. He didn't like how long it took to watch it at home, where he had dial-up still. Next story. Nothing too bad, but he was checking ammo prices every other day for 3 different guns. He was also Googling the side effects of depression medication, post-heart surgery, and a few other sketchy things if taken out of context. He's a weird old man and kind of a hoarder or bargain buyer, but pretty funny. He's been having some health issues and concerned about it. He's harmless and such a nice dude. Still, I think anyone else Googling depression, handgun ammo, and chances of dying of a disease in the same day, they'd be in HR immediately. Next story. Knew a lieutenant, Army, who got fired for playing WoW on his government computer. That was the story anyway. Never mind the fact he kind of sucked at his job. Next story. Old friend of mine would torrent movies at work on his work computer. He worked in the network department. No idea how he thought that was a good idea. Next story. Watched child adult content. Then he threw himself from the 9th floor into the atrium when he got caught. I didn't actually see him do this, but that's what happened. Next story. I had a lesbian coworker whom hadn't at that point made it entirely public that she was a lesbian. Opened her computer first thing one morning to lesbian adult content at our shared desk space. Shut it real quick and went, "My absolutely brother, dude. I really shouldn't let him borrow this anymore." We've had a couple good laughs about it since. Next story. Tame, but stupidity on all sides still makes me chuckle. Coworker number 1 realizes that food they bring into the office goes missing throughout the week. Discusses with coworker number 2. The pair decide to set up a webcam on number 1's desktop. Recording overnight. End of the week, they check the footage. Office lights go on late at night. A security guard comes into view and is seen taking the food and eating it. Coworker number 1 emails HR with the video, giving a detailed account of how they and number 2 found the banana grabber. Security guard is let go. Coworkers get dressing down from HR for recording in the workplace. Next story. Worked it for a local company's call center. 25 stations. We had 3 IT guys, software, me, hardware, and network, and a remote monitoring solution that would allow us to watch anyone's screen. One day, network guy comes over and asks me to look at someone's screen via the monitoring software. Nothing unusual. Then suddenly, a browser window would open, and almost immediately flashback closed. Checked the phone logs, and it coincided with an incoming call to that woman's station. After a brief investigation, turned out she was supplementing her income from the call center with a side hustle providing inappropriate services and arranging it through our work system. She became unemployed shortly after that. Oh, and the other one from the same call center? One of the reps called the help desk indicating that she had just launched a Pornado by clicking on the link in a spam email. Next story. We had someone fired who would watch adult content in the office with his back to his office door, so the screen was fully visible from outside his office, which was at the end of a hallway. Next story. I had a boss who destroyed his laptop by hitting it with his phone when a competing company launched their app before the one I was working at. I didn't actually see it happen. He did this at his home, but he walked in the next day and noted that he couldn't work because he didn't have a computer anymore. Next story. It was crazy to witness a coworker automate all of his tasks and jobs by writing his own scripts for the machines by himself for the first time. Brought in a couple old laptops to hook up to various things to make it all happen. Then just chilled and checked the programs every once in a while. Got a whole lot more done than I did, that's for sure. Yet spent most of the day wandering around with a giant tub of cheese balls under one arm and joking with coworkers. But actual crazy? Making inappropriate adult content Photoshop art on the boss's workstation? Literally all shift, right out in the open in front of everyone. She didn't give a care that day. Next story. More. Worked at a computer reseller back when that was a thing. We would set up the largest server that came through the door and copy over all the music and movies that showed up on every other computer. Everything. We basically had Netflix and Spotify before they were things. Employees would bring in USB drives and copy over stuff nights and weekends. Multiple giant USB hubs, all full, 24/7. This was over 20 years ago, so doesn't sound impressive now. But I think we had a few terabytes of media. Right now, my two previous employers still employ me to run their off-site backups. I took servers from both to manage the process. I keep them busy. Next story. Someone installed cameras in the women's washrooms and saved the videos onto a work computer. They were, of course, discovered. Police confiscated all their electronics at work and home. They discovered deeply disturbing content involving his stepchildren. Very quickly fired and divorced. Next story. So I worked in a secure call center. Intranet only, no outside net access. Security scans at the doors, no cell phones, no paper, etc. We handled banking and credit card information, and the idea was to make it near impossible for an employee to sneak out account information. I'd been there about a year when management decided to give us all internal email accounts so we could more easily communicate with our managers, team leads, and other employees. They said some general chatter/jokes, and things were okay, but to keep it to a minimum. Someone, somehow, snuck in a flash drive with something on it that let them get around the firewall blocking our internet access. They then spent 3 days surfing the internet at work before using to send a chain letter, this was in 2016 mine, not 1997, from their personal email to their secure internal email account. And they would have gotten away with all of this, except they decided to forward that chain letter to a handful of other internal email addresses, including their supervisors. This triggered a full shutdown of our entire location, while it tracked where and how the system had been compromised, and security watched hours of video to figure out who was responsible. 300-something employees just sitting around for a full 12 hours, unable to touch their systems or do anything at all until this had all been traced, and they were certain our intranet was again secure. That person went to jail and was prosecuted. No idea what they were ultimately sentenced with. Next story. Busted a guy looking at explicit adult content at work in the early 2000s. He was watching so much it impacted the internet for everyone else in the company, which is how I found it. Now, next story. I once had a boss share his screen during a presentation to a client, and he had downloaded an explicit adult content video to his desktop. He didn't notice, but we all did. Next story. Saw a work laptop from a colleague who had been let go. There was absolutely nothing interesting or strange on there, at all whatsoever. Highly suspicious. Next story. Had a coworker in a call center watching adult content while taking customer calls. They had screen recording on every time a call was on. So he would close it out as soon as the call beeped and open it back up as soon as the call ended. He didn't realize the screen recording lasted 30 seconds after the call ended to capture how they closed out the call. Absolute moron move. His defense was literally, I wasn't taking a call, so who cares what I was doing? Next story. Storytime first deployment in Iraq in early '08. I was part of Bush's surge. We're staying in Mosul for a few weeks, with units known to be a little less strict on military norms. Before one flight, me and my commander went to their operations center to talk to their mission commander. We walk in and there are several large flat screens on a plywood wall with 6 to 8 stations of computers in front of them. The screens had weather information predator feeds, etc. And the top right screen was playing explicit adult content. We just roll with it. We then walk up to the CW5 leading the mission at one of those desktop stations. He has two screens. One of them is also playing explicit adult content. Most people in the room have no rank or patches on, so he just starts talking to us about the night's mission. As he's talking, he looks up at my commander mid-sentence, glances at the blue oak leaves on his shoulder, then casually minimizes his adult content window and keeps talking. It was a very surreal/strange experience, and by far the craziest thing I've seen work computers used for, let alone government computers. Next story. I caught someone, through the security logs, who apparently spent most of his time watching adult content in a glass cubicle in the middle of the floor. How did nobody ever notice? Next story. Run a Counter-Strike server off the web application server. Apparently was running for a few months before anybody noticed. He got fired. Was about 10 years ago before everything ran in the cloud. Next story. Got a help desk call escalated to me once from a manager asking to look into a third shift supervisor's search history. They had suspicion that he was looking up adult content. I told him it should all be blocked, but we will look into it. Fun fact, the computer in question was the next story. Let's see off the top of my head. 1. The owner's multiple communications with about 50 different escorts during 2 different marriages. 2. One married coworker who was in his 40s having a very inappropriate chat session with a young woman in his department reported it to his boss, who did nothing with it until I showed him the chat conversation that they had intimate activity on his desk. 3. The internet was running so slow at the office all week long, so after tracing it down, eventually found out that one guy downloaded about 2 terabytes worth of adult content onto his work computer. A very inappropriate themed. This was early 2000s, load of bandwidth. 4. 2 of the guys in the field having a love triangle with the head of accounting over emails/texts. Meanwhile, the one guy was submitted false expense reports to the tune of $350,000 to $400,000 over an 8-year period that the accounting head was signing off on. Tons of other stories of stupid things people have done when I worked in it years ago, but those are the craziest ones that I remember. Next story. McKay. Fred liked anime. We had that in common. Fred had merch. We had that in common. So one day Fred says to me, "Can you help me fix my computer real quick? I don't want anyone to see what I did." Okay, dude probably locked himself out or deleted Sys32. No. I opened the laptop, and it immediately started playing that song by Rick Astley. Confused, I looked at him while it logged in. Look back, and the wallpaper is tentacle adult animated content. Nothing too bad, but I'm thinking he has a virus at this point. He told me he downloaded an adult animated content game from the Pirate Bay, launched it, and then his laptop started playing that song. The game was just minimized. This game was a 5-hour video of that damn song. Closed the media player, and the problem was solved. Next story. Stream college basketball tournament games at work, on his work machine. Our company had a no streaming policy. We worked in the accounting department, and this was during month/quarter end close. Our internet was kind of janky, and it was slowing down everyone being able to post their entries. He got to have a personal chat with a couple of managers and HR, but work went relatively smoothly after that. Next story. When I worked in a prison as a corrections officer, I heard of another officer downloading The Office on a work computer. In case you don't know, state computers and their activity is monitored. Needless to say, he got fired. Next story. My former boss set up a screen share for a conference call. When the call started, he had Angry Birds up on Facebook games or whatever. He panicked to close the window, and behind it was explicit adult content. He had a major series of missteps, like telling the CEO's wife the men are working, and got fired. He was a total clown. Next story. I used to work for Enron, and one of the ladies was watching explicit adult content in an open setting with full volume. No one batted an eyelid or said anything. The floor was open concept. She was one of the regional managers, and all she did all day every day was come to work and open up her computer and watch adult content. Next story. This was around a year ago. I worked for a collection agency, and I was curious where someone was, as they weren't there that day. Apparently, one of their best friends heard me say it and messaged that person. We had teams, and she messaged me to keep her name out of my mouth. I get it wasn't my business. I honestly wasn't thinking much of it. Usually, if someone is gone, just hope they're okay, etc. Next story. Funny story from yesterday. So one of our teachers, 60 years old man that teaches in our school for 30 years, asked me to scroll down to test questions as we wrote the test cues. He needs to leave, so OFC, we took advantage of that and went onto his search history. We found some adult content and some like, what is the most beautiful adult content star? And the funniest or saddest from all of this, we found some like, why my jerk hurts while it gets hard, or penis pain in the morning. The best part is he always acts kind of pervy. But no one gives a damn because his inappropriate jokes are funny as care, but still, we ain't looking at him the same way we did before. Next story. Not sure if this counts, but my coworkers on a job in the past always looked weird at me for gaming on the office PCs during office hours, mostly as everything like that was supposed to be blocked. I don't know how no one in the office ever just got past the protection on said PCs, as said job was tech-related and it was rather easy to pull off. Next story. Not work computer, but when I was in high school, we used to regularly visit some very inappropriate and disturbing websites in the computer lab. The internet was the Wild West back then, and we used to watch the most disturbing stuff even during class. Next story. My boss once used an employee's computer to email himself a resignation letter acting as that employee. He acted like it was a huge joke. The people who found out about it thought it was pretty wrong. Next story. One of my coworkers was running a used car business from the medication room, hospital psych unit. He had all sorts of customer information saved pretty blatantly. He was buying and reselling cars entirely over the phone and email. Occasionally, he would fax stuff. Our boss at the time loved him, even though he was an absolutely terrible nurse in all aspects, so she never fired him. But I checked my personal email one time to grab a link to something I was going to use for work. Next story. Guy who used to work at my company got arrested for illegally photographing women in the bathroom and uploading the images to inappropriate websites using his work laptop. Next story. Worked with a guy who has a very, very, very religious wife. One night, he was caught pleasuring himself while watching explicit stuff on a work computer and fired. I feel bad for the guy, given his wife, who I met a time or two. Next story. Okay, it might have actually been me. In an old job, I got promoted and ended up sitting in the main office room, my desk being the closest to the company owner. If I had lunch at my desk, I'd pull up the old website MaxGIF, which, if you're unfamiliar, was just a full-screen website that showed you random GIFs from Imgur, I think. Anyway, sat down for lunch one day, chatting with the owner, boot up MaxGIF. First GIF was a full-screen, very explicit content. He eventually saw the funny side, but it did take a little explaining. Next story. Not too crazy, but I still laugh thinking about it in mid-OOs. I watched someone log into their computer that was already hooked up to the projector for about 20-plus people in a small room. They nailed their username, misclicked and didn't select the password prompt, and overwrote their username with their password for all to see. The password in question, I love pies. Next story. Coworker of mine complained about it running slow. I offered to clean up the drive for him. Temp folder of adult content. Lots and lots of adult content. I just deleted them and never said anything. Next story. When I worked at Northrop Grumman, this guy in the office had a desktop background that was a close-up image of dozens of women's intimate images. He called it an extremely inappropriate desktop background. He also tried to show me some video of a woman, an extremely disturbing video involving an animal. When I left the company 2 years later, he still had a job, and he wasn't the most messed up person I met there by far. Next story. I had a coworker with a huge adult content collection on his computer. His screensaver cycled through his inappropriate image collection. One day, the owner of the company was in our department while the guy's screensaver was running. The owner was not amused. The guy didn't get fired, but eventually was transferred to another department that didn't need computers. Next story. A kid had a college-issued laptop and in the middle of class, on the campus Wi-Fi, pirated a adult content film. Not only did they download adult content, but also pirated adult content. Next story. Around the turn of the century, I was working on second shift. My boss was supposed to be a working supervisor, but he basically just hit up the offices or left for a 2-hour lunch every day. He used the secretary's computer to look at adult content. One day I got sick of having no help, so I let on to another boss what he was up to. They looked at the history and found that he was looking at adult content for hours every night. He was let go right on the spot. Next story. My internship started about a month after the Miami violent incident. A guy in my department showed us Ronald Papo's face, or lack thereof, when he was being treated at the hospital. Next story. I work in a department that overlooks the cleaners at a hotel. I had one of them use my computer for an online training module. There was a link to some psyche test that they clicked on by some Harvard students, and the results said he preferred the company of white people over black people. He ended up using my email to message some Harvard research page saying that their test was racist and that he actually loves the company of black people, even more so than the company of white people. I didn't notice till I was looking through my sent emails and just find that with my signature and banner at the bottom, LMAO. Next story. Mild, compared to some of the others here. But one time I had a meeting with an old boss first thing in the morning, and when he woke up his computer, there was a notepad doc with big bold letters that said work on self-discipline up on the screen as some kind of reminder I wasn't meant to see. Next story. So much adult content. Best one was when networked printers were new. A dude printed out a picture to the wrong printer, like in a different building. Of course, the cover sheet printed with it, name and everything. Another dude was checking his personal listings on an adult services website, right out in the open. Next story. I'm a teacher. A colleague of mine tried to find one of our students' mother's social media account on the work desktop. He didn't get to finish his workday. Next story. Dude downloaded Tor and bought drugs from the illegal online marketplace and even had them delivered to the store. Worked like 10 times before a different manager intercepted the package from the mail carrier. As he was coming into work, opened the box, thinking it was product for the store. 1 pound of illegal substances, vacuumed, seal, and in a Mylar bag falls out of the box, along with some drug cartridges and a couple bags of drug-infused food. Next story. Husband, foreman on production line, and wife, engineering assistant slash admin, used company email to write explicit adult fiction between themselves and a third person that worked for one of our clients. Each one would write a chapter, then send it to the next one, round-robin style. This went in for 6 to 7 months before it was discovered. This was approximately 2003. Next story. I never saw it, but heard the story. I worked at a data recovery place, and the customer service guy who worked there was super racist. He was nice to everyone's face, but would say horrible things. He was reviewing the data recovered to make sure the customer got back what they needed. Apparently, the data was photos from a Muslim wedding. He asked another coworker if he wanted to play a game called an extremely racist comment. Absolutely disgraceful behavior. Thankfully, he got fired like 4 to 5 years ago, a few months after I started. He liked me and was really nice, but I'm white, so go figure. Next story. My friend played the "You Are an Idiot" virus on his computer. Not the real thing, but it still lagged a whole lot. We were in music class about to play Gym Kit. Next story. Used to work in a contact center. Someone stole customer card details and used them to pay for Just Eat and cinema tickets. Also heard about a contract developer who deleted loads of code for a new customer database on his last day. Next story. I worked in a school district. The district was computerizing its libraries. They sent PCS to each school site. The carpenters then built cabinets to set the PCS into. At one school, a mother volunteer tried setting up the computer station. The holes the carpenter drilled didn't match the electric cords of the computer. This volunteer cut off the electric cords so the PC slid in flush, instead of asking the carpenter to drill another hole. Next story. When I was a kid in school, we had a teacher caught looking at inappropriate websites. All my classmates knew about it, and then when another teacher noticed it in the search history, the guilty teacher blamed it on the kid with ADHD. None of us dared to say anything. Next story. I work in IT, and one of the VPs brought in their laptop because there was an issue with it. When I opened their browser, something very inappropriate popped up on the screen. I immediately closed it and turned to him, of which he said, "I have no idea what that is." Right. Likely story. Next story. Late to the party here, but a lifetime ago, I had a job that included collecting phones, tablets, and computers back from field techs who were leaving the company. One tablet had a lot of very inappropriate personal content on it, more than any of the others, but a few videos and pictures were stored right on the home page. The thumbnail had a detail that made me think it was him personally. Curiosity got the best of me, and I confirmed it. Next story. Not me, but my cybersecurity professor who did the school's security was asked this and said, once the student body president used the school computers for extremely serious illegal activity that ended with police involvement. Next story. A serious crime was discovered on a production server while working for a small software company about 6 years back. That was an interesting day, seeing him escorted out by police. It wasn't until a year or two later that I heard what actually happened. Next story. A colleague of mine was arrested after being caught in a police sting operation. This guy was responsible for teaching others about the internet. It was early days. Next story. The receptionist was watching extremely disturbing videos on her work computer. I just said, "You probably shouldn't be watching those," and she just kind of shrugged. Next story. One of my coworkers was out on maternity leave, but she showed up to the office to pick some things up. It was right before she delivered, so she was super pregnant. This apparently awakened something in my other coworker, Carl, who started looking at adult content featuring inappropriate images of women on his work PC shortly after she left. He was in a row of cubicles, and his desk was slightly higher than others, so like 20 people could see his screen. He didn't work there much longer. I think about it often. That dude was in his 50s. He just couldn't wait. Next story. Back in the last century, I worked for an amusement park. We had a ride, name withheld, controlled by a PLC, a programmable logic controller. Connected to it was a Win 3.1 computer that allowed you to read the logic ladder. It also had a secondary function, displaying ride information for the primary operator in their booth. Well, we had college kids that worked in maintenance, who would play solitaire, Minesweeper, etc., on the computer in the maintenance room during the evening hours. Well, now the operator no longer sees ride info. They see the game being played. The guy in charge of the programming would remove the games and the kids would reinstall them. big battle of wills. It ended when the kids turned on the screensaver that was supposed to be left inactive and used the bouncing font saver to display the tech's name. Suck is a jerk. The tech quit since management was shrugging it off as a prank. Oddly enough, no ride mechanic was fired. Next story. Some of my old friends at the middle school I went to were going through our science teacher's computer to put their slideshow presentation on the board. When they accidentally clicked on a file, a bunch of very inappropriate images and videos popped up. They went to the principal horrified, and he only received a week or so suspension. Truly crazy to think a middle school teacher had adult content on his school work computer. Next story. My college professor plugged his laptop into the projector, opened it, and it immediately started playing adult content. He freaked out, slammed it shut, ran out of the room, and came back like 20 minutes later and started his lecture like nothing happened. He was still there years later, so I don't think anyone ever found out, which, honestly, I was happy to see. He was a very nice man and a great professor who apparently liked really big chest. Next story. They decided that BitTorrenting movies all day was more important than people being able to get work done. When I say BitTorrenting movies, I mean dozens at a time. While supporting a client's production, no one could use the internet. Once we figured out who was causing it, explained the issue, and asked them to stop. Yeah, 15 more minutes, they are almost done. I cannot confirm or deny that in 2006, we might have been the reason you could not text your vote to a famous United States bass singing competition. Next story. Had a cubicle neighbor at Atten T whose spouse worked there as well. Just a different building. I started to notice that when anyone walked down our row, his 3-monitor setup would just slightly flicker. Apparently, he had a panic button that minimized all windows and launched others in an instant. One day, he was just gone. Turns out, he and his wife were having very inappropriate exchanges over the internal chat tool. Next story. I work in it, seen a lot of out there stuff, but the single craziest thing I've ever seen someone getting fired for doing on their work computer was a director attempting to purchase illegal content involving minors. Yes, that kind. While sitting in his office using the internal company network. Next story. There was a shakeup at work where one guy was laid off and I was transferred to his position along with his PC. I found a directory with video files of deeply inappropriate content. Next story. I've told this story in some of the 8 Focuses subs. Small company had a one-man IT department. The company owner couldn't understand why there were multiple racks of servers and numerous expensive T1 lines coming into the building, costing thousands each month. When the IT guy was on vacation, we got called in to evaluate the equipment and the communications line. We discovered that the IT guy was running a web hosting company on his employer's dime. Almost none of the equipment nor comm lines were needed for the employer. Upon his return to work, the IT guy was promptly fired, and we shut down almost all of the equipment and disconnected the comm line. Sadly, the company was already circling the drain when all of this happened, and they closed the doors within a year or two. Next story. Where I work, the manager's office has glass windows, so you could see in from the main work area. The manager's desk faced the window and the screen was positioned, so he could see it, but you couldn't. You could see his face from our side. One day I came back to the office and saw the manager looking at the screen intently and what looked like him batting it furiously. To my surprise, when he looked up and saw me, he gave me a friendly wave and beckoned me into his office. It turned out he had been cleaning his glasses. Vigorously, I might add. Next story. I once saw a madman who created a rotating circle using C and in VGA mode. This was early 90s and triggered my interest in graphics programming and math. Next story. Worked with a guy who kept a catalog of videos of him having intimate activity with random people. He was a trainer and accidentally pulled up a video in front of the class. It was a pretty easy one to resolve with HR. Next story. My old employer, a hospital, had a blocker that blocked anti-Semitic websites. I think they mean anti-Semitic. I left that hospital in 2010 and heard shortly beforehand that more people looked up recipes than health information. Based on my own department, I find that believable. Also, shortly before I left, word got around about a patient who came into the ER having used something rectally that wasn't intended to be used that way, and were showing each other the x-ray. I refused to look at it and would have even if it hadn't been the early days of strict HIPAA enforcement. One of my fellow pharmacists had an adult content blocker installed on her home computer because she had young children, and found that she couldn't access the Pharmacy Times website because it was about drugs. Next story. We had a real genius at our office who not only used his issued work phone to take photos of his adult entertainer wife, but used the issued work computer to pop on MySpace and advertise where she was stripping at and setting up private appointments using work email. We actually had to go to 4 ESC hearings to explain why he was fired. Next story. Okay, I'll fess up. Many years ago, I was given a company laptop to use. I was not very smart at all in how these things worked and what a network administrator could see. One day, I got hauled into the boss's office. She demanded to know why I was using a company laptop to look at very inappropriate websites made up. I froze for just a few seconds, then blamed it on my teenage kid. It worked. I never did that again. Next story. I worked for a car rental company in the insurance replacement department a few years ago. The building we worked in had an inside track around it, and I would walk it every day on my breaks. You could see what the people who were sat on the outside of the work area were looking at. I walked by a guy who was watching adult content every day for about 2 weeks. They finally fired him. Next story. Probably something I did. I was a new hire at a startup and was eager to take over the website so that I could redesign it. I aggressively demanded the admin access to the site and then proceeded to change the name of the admin user. Admin is a terrible name for that user for security reasons. Well, in so doing, I deleted the website. Completely gone. Deleted on the first day of my job. I had to go crawling back to the previous admin and beg for a backup, tail between my legs. Next story. I got a BJ on my lunch break when my GF came by to visit, and then went back to work for 3 hours with my tie over my shoulder. No one said a word, and that means to me they knew. Next story. Not one, but all the computers. My boss had worked for Microsoft, so he thought he was the guy regarding tech. He wasn't. I was the only IT guy at this company of 60 people who developed software. He asked me to rename the domain. I said, "This is more complex than you realize. It's going to break some stuff unless we have an actual plan." He said, "Do it." I said, "Give me that in writing and sign and date it because email won't work unless we migrate." He did and said, "Change the name, now." I did. 20 hours later, it all worked again. I left at like 10 a.m. after a hectic night and told him I'd see him in a couple of days. I drank a scotch when I got home and slept for 12 hours. Meh. Next story. Anytime we would be hanging out at school, he would say, "Hey, watch this," quickly tap some keyboard button, and voila, the coding computer coding. And he disabled some of the built-in blocking features through tampering with that stuff.